I'm just going to go down the list in order and just look at stuff alphabetically, just because it keeps things organized for me. But I did make this little sort of list of more or less like talking prompts for everyone's stuff. So again, I'm going to be a little bit, I guess, definitely more in depth, but I'm also going to be enforcing you guys should participate a little bit more in crit this week. So I have gone as far as to make, I think I messed up my weeks, that's annoying. I did. So I went and I made a little like bin of papers, so if no one is saying anything, I'm literally just going to start randomly pulling names out of a hat. Which again, I'll only do if no one's like saying anything. But so again, like prompts and stuff to look out for. This is also more or less like kind of some of the stuff that I look at when I'm grading assignments. So in terms of lighting, one thing I really look for this particular assignment is, and it sounds really stupid, but like, can you tell the difference between the day and night lighting? Like, is it obvious and is it a believable difference? And then like, how's the overall look of the lighting? Is it, feel believable for wherever your light sources are? Color temperature reasonable, like lighting, direction, intensity, shadows, like are these things also, reasonable and believable for the space? From a purely technical standpoint, I look at how well you can actually see the objects that you've made. And then on a more sort of like artsy-fartsy bent, like, does the lighting create a specific feel for the space? So if you're doing, it's one thing to light a scene, I guess, for just sort of, I want people to be able to see the objects in it, they just need to see them, versus doing something that kind of creates like a very specific ambiance for whatever you're working with. And again, that's like, what that is, or like what, that ambiance is completely dependent on whatever your scene that you're making. But ideally the lighting would sort of help to, I guess, tell the story of your space a little bit more in its own right. And it makes sense? Cool. And then in terms of the overall space, again, sounds stupid, but like, is it obvious what it's supposed to be from your renders? And does it feel realistic? And by that, I mostly just mean, is it, kind of ties into texturing, like how are the textures and the models, but is it populated enough and populated believably? So again, like for a child's room, I might expect to see a bunch of stuff just sort of like thrown all over the floor. I will, a lot of time, like for this assignment in particular, since it's like a very environment-driven thing, I will be looking kind of specifically for the additional objects you've added to the scene to make it feel believable, and like a complete full scene. I'll also be looking at the placement of objects. Like one example I guess I always think of is if you're doing, like a bar or a restaurant scene, it is incredibly rare, unless your tables are like physically mounted to the ground. If people are left to like push in their chairs on their own, they're gonna be, offset from the table. They're gonna be probably at different angles because they've caught on leg chairs or something like, or like, they've hit the table and like aren't pushed in totally straight. So if I see, a bunch of chairs that are lined up exactly, like perfectly straight at the same angle, that's gonna sort of break my believability in the scene. And again, it takes like 5 seconds. Just go through and like literally just sort of shift things around a little bit, rotate them kind of randomly. It'll make your scene feel a lot more organic and natural. It's also, again, pretty easy thing to do. In terms of render angles, I mean, for one, like, did you submit the ones that I assigned you guys? And then do those render angles, do a good job of showing off the models that you've made. If not, like, how could the angles maybe be improved to display your objects a little bit better? And same thing, like, are there any improvements that could be made to the composition to maybe show off your objects or just display them in a more aesthetically pleasing way? Pretty much the same thing kind of for texturing, like, do the textures feel complete? I realize, like, texturing for, like, a lot of objects isn't actually due this week, so this is more like a final thing. But if everything looks like just a Lambert with just a color map on it, like, by the time the final is actually due, that's not what I would call complete texturing. I do expect to see some, like, bump maps and roughness maps and stuff like that on your stuff. Do textures make sure, do they feel like they make sense in the space? If you're doing, like, an old bunker or something like that and everything is, like, brand new shiny stainless steel, like, that feels maybe a little bit unrealistic. And then one thing I also usually look for is like, are there particular textures that stand out oddly in the space, if that makes sense? Like, is there one texture that looks like a kind of just like Lambert with color on it, whereas everything else looks like really nice and refined? Or is there, one texture that is like, wow, that's a super cool looking texture. I am just gonna nose in your mod file and like see how you made that because it looks awesome. And then just like, I don't know. I feel like the rest of it is pretty straightforward. Just like any stuff you maybe could improve or like add more detail with for textures, for your objects. Like, is it obvious what they are? How's the quality of the model? And are they shown off well in the renders? I've pretty much been grading and giving feedback on these models for the last several weeks. So at this point, it should be pretty obvious, hopefully, what they are. But that's, again, more or less just like some quick little guidelines and like things that you might use as talking points for crit for today and also for the final. Also, again, just to give you an idea of like the kind of things that I'm looking for when I'm looking at your assignments. So any questions about any of this? Cool. In that case, I'm just going to start randomly opening things. In this case, I think I'm going to start starting from the end of the alphabet to shake things up, but like not really. And once again, we don't have the ability to view images in anything other than Photoshop or Microsoft Paint. I have opted for Photoshop. All right, so I think I would also like to do a thing. So whenever I pull up your stuff, would you mind just like telling people what the space you were making is, and just quick list of like the objects, like your 3 main objects for that scene. So Tyrone, I believe this is yours? Cool. You want to give a quick rundown of what the space is for those that might not be familiar? Nice. Alright, cool. I like the variety. Is this by chance like you or someone you know?
Yeah, that's my brother.
Nice. I always think like every time I see picture frames, it's always like weird like selfies of people, and I think it's hilarious when that's the thing. Alright, so I mean off the bat, like I definitely like the texturing has improved like crazy dramatically since the last time that I saw this. Is this your pen from earlier in the quarter? Nice. All for reusing stuff like that. Alright, so any questions or anything like that before we go into feedback? Cool. Yeah. Alright, so some like the environmental fog and stuff we went over last class? Sweet. Yeah, I think that'll look pretty cool. Alright, yeah, so I think I've organized these more or less by day and night. I like that you actually included, like, in this, I think this little piece here looks super nice. Like, just the fact that it's, like, modeled in the screws, like, I don't know, this kind of stuff I think always adds a lot of polish to pieces, like, if there's any way you guys are able to go back and add this kind of detail in. It's always, like, a nice little touch, especially because the screw heads are actually modeled in. But yeah, so, I mean, does anyone have any thoughts or comments about any of these renders? Again, I'll just leave this up in case you guys want to reference it. Yep. Oh, you guys are welcome to just yell out if you have stuff. Sorry.
Did you say one piece that you did was the desk or the glass, display case? I think honestly a lot of the stuff is pretty good. I like the where you added in there, like on the sides of it, and a few like just kind of scrapes, I guess.
Yeah.
Near the glue as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think the glass is a little bit foggy, a little bit too foggy, I should say. And then I think
agree with all of these things. Especially the glass. That is a little bit. For the glass. Watch the samples for that, which might just be going in. Are you rendering this in? You said Arnold was okay. So that just might be a matter of going into your render settings. I was actually rendering in software in my last class. Just go into your render settings, and you might need to bump up the transmission samples a little bit. Transmission's the bit for glass. So if your glass is ever grainy, that might be, a thing to look at. But yeah, and then I think, again, lightning would be good. I do really like the sort of targeted wear you have, especially how it's like centered on this corner. I think is quite believable. I think I would like to add to those last comments where definitely wood grain texture would be helpful. I feel like it might also be good to go back in and sharpen some of these edges a little bit. They feel a little bit maybe overly rounded. Aesthetically, I actually kind of like it. It just doesn't quite feel like wood to me. So that might be something that you would also consider doing. Just as a random side note, and I'll probably say this like a bunch of times today, but if you guys are ever, one of the things that I like always specifically look for texture-wise, if you have wooden stuff in your scene, I go out of my way to like look at, is the wood texture going the correct direction? Because that's one of those things where, to me it's always like, it's usually pretty obvious if the wood texture is like running some crazy direction, but it's also like one of those things where it's like subtle enough that people might not notice it, but they'll look at your object and be like, something about this looks off and I just don't know what it is, and it's usually because like the wood textures, again, like not running the correct direction. So for something like this, if you were shooting for wood, I would expect a few different things for this. So either it would be something like a picture frame where like there'd be a little 45-degree miter, or not miter, like 45-degree cut on the corner here. So you'd have like one wood grain running long ways on this piece of wood, one running long ways on this piece of wood. Or it'd be something maybe that was made a little bit, I guess, less elegantly, where you would just have basically like 2x4s glued together. So you would just have like one cut here, this whole front piece would be a 2x4, whole back piece would be like a 2x4, and then there would just be another little piece of wood behind it. And usually, so if you guys are ever doing wood stuff, I used to do this crazy thing where I'd like set up my UVs all nice and perfect and like super organized on my UV grid, and I'd go into Photoshop and I'd like take a wood texture and cut it into 10 different pieces and like rotate all the wood grains, and I'm like, this is horrible on so many levels. Nobody wants to do this. And then I've actually decided since then that it is less gross to just cut up your UVs. Like, if you know how your wood grain is going to be set up your geometry like that, and then you can just cut your UVs into basically pieces for each chunk of wood and just lay them out in a way that they work with a generic internet wood texture, if that makes sense. That was kind of a hardcore tangent, but yeah. But no, I think wood grain, yeah, would totally look nice on this. Anyone else have any other thoughts or comments on this? Cool. All right. So I'm gonna say I like the subtle texture you have on here too. I actually didn't notice the first time I looked at it, but it looks nice. But yeah, so I'm gonna say I see a difference between your day and night lighting, but I think that difference could maybe be pushed a little bit. This is also, and I mean this in like totally like not a negative way, because I think it's actually a really interesting effect. This image looks so dry. Like, it looks like almost like dry old Western. Something about it. Like, it has a very aged look to it, which I think is actually interesting. Like, I don't dislike it at all. But yeah, so where are the light sources? Like, you have like these large windows on the one side of your scene. I feel like these could also maybe be slightly clearer. But apart from these windows, what light sources and like what types of lights do you have in this scene? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gotcha.
So they're mesh lights, all of them, in the, like, when I originally rendered the night one, like, they look too similar. I think part of that is because they didn't have enough light coming through the windows to
Mhm.
reflect that. So I changed the color temperature
Mm.
of the lights, and
Yeah. What is? I can't see this. There's just like a giant like ceramic apple in here. Amazing. But yeah, so one thing I would suggest doing, so it looks like you change the color of the lights themselves, like the ceiling lights for the night lighting. Okay. So I think what I would recommend is maybe, because it looks like the day and night lighting is, as far as I can tell, more or less only distinguishable by the color of the light. Like it seems like the overall intensity is pretty much the same. So what I might consider doing is, so the ceiling lights would be a fixed color temperature, so I wouldn't necessarily like play with that per se. But what you could consider doing is, it looks like this is a relatively small shop, and the fact that like pretty much a quarter of it is just windows, you could use that to sort of play with the color temperature of the light coming in through the window during the day, and use that as the brightest light source in the room to alter the color temperature for the daylight lighting. And then I think for the night, what might be good is to, and again, this is just like suggestions, I'm not saying like you have to do any of this, but what I might consider doing is just to create a little bit more variation in the overall brightness of the scene, would be to put it into, if you've ever seen stores where it's closed, but they like leave a few lights on for their security cameras, like in case someone like comes in to rob them, the cameras have light to video them. Do something like that, where maybe only one of the 3 ceiling lights is turned on. Or you could put in just like an additional like tiny light somewhere, just as a sort of, hey, here is our night lighting, just so you can see if someone's like rummaging in the shop, kind of thing. Because I feel like there's also, I'm assuming that since this is a shop, that when I say night lighting, I'm picturing like shop closed after dark. At which point usually there's not like a full array of lights lit in the space. But I mean, I think the lighting that you have, I mean, it does a good job of showing off your scene. It feels like, honestly, kind of like my dentist's office. But yeah. And then I think it would also be good to just, if you're going for like pawn shop, I like how you've sort of gone in and like populated the display case. Like I think that looks pretty nice. I would go in and maybe just like add some more stuff to the walls. You could even consider adding shelves to the walls. And then if you're, so again, and this goes for, again, kind of everyone. If you're at this point still looking for a bunch of ways to populate your scene, look for stuff that would be something you could maybe model at once and then get a lot of sort of reuse out of it. So in this case, I'm thinking, picture frames are always good, posters are always good. You could make a bunch, I know there's like a bunch of people are really into like vintage, like metal road signs and like advertisement signs for like Coca-Cola. So like vintage signs would be great for this kind of space, or like posters. If you guys end up doing like posters or anything like that in your scenes, I would recommend, maybe not so much for a pawn shop, but if it's like an office, you could, overlap them on top of each other. If they're held into the wall, figure out how they're anchored to the wall. If it's with tacks, like model those tacks in. If it's with tape, just sort of tack them to the wall. But then also usually look at, paper very rarely lays perfectly flat on the wall. Like there's like this weird poster here that's been here since I was in school. Don't know where it came from. But if you look at that, like it's clearly held on with tape, but you can see that it's sort of like bubbling out towards the sides and stuff like that. And that would be a relatively easy thing to recreate. That would make the paper look a little bit more realistic with extremely minimal effort. In this case, I'm also thinking, again, you could add shelves, and it looks like in the display cases, you have like a bunch of little sort of like glass tchotchkes and stuff like that modeled in. So this is also good stuff that you could kind of go in and repurpose. You could add in a bunch of teapots and just like paint a bunch of teapots or something like that. I think especially for a pawn shop, there's a lot of sort of very, very reproducible things that you could use that would require minimal effort to differentiate from each other. That would really kind of help the space feel not cluttered, but like more full, I guess, if that makes sense. But yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments on this? All right. Cool. Dear God, where am I going? Do I have time? What am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing anymore. All right, whatever. Haha. Cool. Ah. One day IT is going to make me very happy and fix the image things. All right, cool. All right, cool. So I feel like it's probably fairly obvious what this space is, but do you want to give us a quick rundown of your scene?
Yeah, so we're obviously doing child
Cool. You've got the feel of it.
Yeah, the objects that I did here are the building blocks.
All right, and then
We're low column.
yeah, and then you also did, I think, the train.
The train and the chest.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. So any like immediate questions or concerns about your project as it stands right now?
Slight concern being in-engine rendering because our textures don't transfer over unless they're Lamberts.
Oh, your textures is in.
Yeah, like the
Like the maps won't transfer over.
AI standard surface textures that we've made.
Did you do them procedurally or?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So. All right.
Yeah, all Arnold,
Oh, yeah.
they don't transfer.
Yeah, this is fair. I actually forgot that Lamberts will transfer textures over. You can always it should when he brings it over, does it just bring it over as like here is a random material that's just like unmapped?
It makes it the default Unity like white material, and you can't edit it.
That's stupid.
It's part of the scene. So
Gross.
You can't do it.
So we've been having trouble with that for weeks. Like,
Gotcha.
is that right if we just render the final thing in Arnold, or?
Yeah. So.
What I was doing, I was making the Unity material and then just making putting on the albedo as the diffuse and then the normal map, and then playing around with material and smoothness. That's like all you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a few random tidbits about rendering and stuff in Engine. So first of all, so at this point, if you guys are doing low poly and haven't started rendering in Engine, and/or some people in my last class said that like it seems like they were using Octane and like the licensing crapped out or something super crazy in the last week. I will harass IT about that and also email you guys the email address for IT in case you guys ever find that stuff. You can just email them immediately. They've, for the most part, been pretty responsive about fixing stuff, except for the image viewing thing on the computers. So that would definitely be, like, if there's ever, again, like, issues with the computers or, like, holy crap, the licensing for, like, Maya has gone away, or something insane, you can totally email IT about that. But so, anyway, so at this point, again, if you guys are doing low poly, if you haven't started rendering in Unity or have been just, like, having explosive issues with, like, licensing in Unity, and you want to render in Maya, I'm going to say at this point that's fine. You still have practice doing like low poly and stuff. My other thought, and I do this if I upload textures to Sketchfab because it also doesn't really bring in any of your like saved color maps or anything like that, is you could also conceivably just assign everything different random Lamberts. So like I don't know how many materials you have on this little train here, but like for each material, just like give it a different Lambert, and then theoretically in Unity you could then just go through and like remap your textures. It's not ideal, but like it might work. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I still am not super familiar with rendering in Unity. that was usually someone else's department when I worked with Unity. But yeah, so if you want to render in Maya, that's fine. That being said, if you guys, I can't promise I'll be like immediately helpful, but I do have people that like regularly work with Unity and are much more familiar with it than I am. So if you guys are having specific issues, you're welcome to shoot me an email, and I can, Google stuff myself, or I can ask said other people who are actually like working with Unity for a living, if they know how to fix any of these things. But yeah, Unity's like weird, and rendering Unity's weird. Did that answer your questions, or?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, 'cause I really like. It's weird. I don't know. I'm all for you guys like working with stuff that's closer to your major, but I'm also just like, oh god, I can't help you troubleshoot Unity. That's like terrifying to me. But anyway. All right. So this is all done with Arnold and stuff. Okay. Oh, follow-up tidbit. If you guys are working low poly and decide to render in Maya, you can keep your scene low poly. Don't worry about smoothing it. That's fine. But yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, I like the. Oh, I really like this handprint. I find it satisfying. Make sure this is sitting on your chest. It totally looks like pieces of this is floating, and then like part of me says it's not, but I think it might be floating.
I think, like, the furthest left side is kind of fine, but then to the right is definitely floating.
Yeah. Either way, things to watch out for. But yeah, so anyone have any thoughts and comments on any of the renders and stuff here? Lighting, etc.?
I like all the wear you added to all your models.
Yeah. I do think the uniformity of the wear is nice, where it seems like it's all like a similar material. Like I assume that this is like either wood or particle board that's just like has a like paint on it. And I think like the wear does make sense for that kind of thing. I still think it might be interesting to see a little bit, like, is there a specific place where this is like picked up a lot to open it that like might have more scratches? But I do think that like overall the scratches you have do look nice. Or like, I know me personally, I can't keep the corners of these things neat to save my life. Like I always drop stuff on it like an idiot and like take dents out of it. But again, that's just me being klutzy. And I think what you've done, like the beveling and stuff on all the corners, comes across really nicely. It definitely presents a little bit more of a refined look in the models. Shiny teddy bear. Alright, cool, yeah, so... Oh, nice, and I like the speckles on the table. At some point, it seems like this could maybe use like a different like roughness map or something on it. But I do like the splatters here. Again, watch your stuff like sitting floating a little bit. And then one thing, so like if it were me, I think one thing I would do with this, and it looks like you've maybe done a little bit on the end. I might go through and just like slightly rotate some of these blocks, or like shift them so there's like not like crazy out of alignment about to fall over, but just like ever so slightly. Because that would totally help this feel like really, really organic and like cool. And I think this is like a pretty nice view and layout of the scene too. But yeah, so how do people feel, I guess, about the day blocks and night blocks? Yeah, so how do people feel about the, I guess, different lightings and like how they compare to each other?
Definitely think the night looks really nice. It looks pretty realistic for nighttime settings.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the daylight is a little bit like a bit more artificial. Like it's more like the light is coming from like a light source rather than natural light.
Yeah. Or like so what are the different lights in your scene for the day and night lighting?
They're in roughly the same position.
Mhm.
Like I have two overhead and
Okay.
one coming in from the window area.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure you can see from the renders.
Yeah. So as
Maybe make the overhead ones less intense and the window one more, so it feels like
Yeah, I think that might be a reasonable thing to do. I think it also depends like on the size of the window. So again, I can't see that in any of the scenes, but if there's like a huge window or like a huge window in the scene, especially if it's like facing like south or something where the light's shining through it all day, usually that's going to be the brightest thing in the scene. If you have like a tiny jail cell window, then your whatever artificial lighting you have is totally going to be the most prominent. So I think again that just depends on your scene. But yeah, that would definitely be an option to just like reduce the overhead lights a little bit. I think it would also help just like visually to in at least one render maybe like see that window, because I think that would help the viewer like place where that light is coming from. I don't know off the top of my head find anything like super weird about the day lighting, but I do think it would be nice to see, again, at least in one render, maybe see the window. Because again, I think that would just sort of help ground the viewer in terms of like light source. I do like the weird color of the nightlight. I think that's kind of funny. One thing I might say for the night lighting is that I almost feel like in certain areas it could be darker. And I say, so if I remember correctly, did you have like an open door to a hallway or something in here?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can see the light coming in from the building blocks.
Building blocks. Night blocks?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, on the floor, yeah. So that might be another thing where like having that in at least one render, being able to like see that open door would help sort of solidify how that lighting is working. And then I think, is that the only source of light in the room for the night?
There's that, the window light, and the two overhead ones, which are not very intense and a little purple.
Okay. So I think what I personally might do is just, what is this a, I looked at this, I'm like, is this a pill bottle?
It's a little sippy cup.
Ah, that makes sense. That makes so much more sense. Ah, yes, good. Okay. So I think what I might do is just like turn off the overhead lights potentially, because I feel unless they're on a dimmer, they probably, unless they're on a dimmer and or very expensive lights, they wouldn't probably change color temperature to be the purpley, if that is the ones that if you did change the color temperature. My other suggestion would be maybe to have, if you can orient the window light a little bit in a way where the shadows are sort of falling interestingly across your scene. It's always a good way, especially with like really dark lighting, to use the door light or like window light to really highlight certain things that you want the viewer to see. In this case, maybe like you really like the sheets or something on the bed that are there. You can shine a light over those to really like pop some of the shadows and stuff out in those. But yeah, so I mean, I think that's like really my only commentary with the lighting is like maybe some of the night stuff could be a little bit more targeted. But I do think that like overall these look pretty nice. And I think so I mentioned this in the few lightings. I would maybe focus, or like it might be worth for the scene to do maybe one or two, like I think the shots you have are really nice and artsy. From a grounding sense, again, I think it might be good to get one, throw a camera or something in this corner of the room so you see like the window and the door. And it would just, I guess, help sort of see the whole space a little bit. So I think that would be good to do, but yeah, I think overall, like, this is coming along pretty nicely. I like how you sort of have blocks and stuff thrown all over the floor. Got like a nice little bookshelf. It might be nice to duplicate some of these books, because I just looked at this side and there's like, it looks like there's one book and then most of it's empty. So maybe if you could like even just throw some more blocks there, like put some crayons or something like that. I do think this space feels maybe a little bit empty right now, but yeah, I mean, I think overall this looks pretty nice. Anyone else have any other thoughts, comments? Cool. Do. Alright. Cool. Cool. So we have theoretically somewhere extracted files from this. Huzzah. Alright, cool. So which ones are the most up-to-date renders? I guess the week 9, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cool. Alright, cool. So I feel like it's kind of obvious what the space is, but you want to just give us a quick rundown of what the space is?
Oh yeah, sure. It's supposed to be a Western bar.
Cool. Alright, so any questions or concerns about anything before we go into crit? Take this as no. Alright, so anyone have any thoughts or first of all, are these which ones are the day and which ones are the night lighting?
The first four should be day, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yes. Okay. Alright, cool. So anyone have any thoughts or comments about overall scene, lighting, etc.? Shoot.
If it's like a Western bar, I would consider maybe adding more like grime or like dust or something. Obviously, it's in the desert, and the piano seems like super shiny, and the flavors come in like good and stain and dust.
Yeah. I found those to be valid comments. Yeah, so I mean, again, I don't know, like, half the stuff, the texturing, like, isn't actually due until the final. So texturing at this point is, like, kind of a crapshoot. It would be nice to have some more wear on this by the time the finals actually rolls around. I do really like, I think the sheen on the top of the chairs is nice. Just something about the way that the light is, like, hitting that is, like, very satisfying. Incidentally, if you guys ever have areas like this where the light is just sort of like shining across a flat surface, it's a really good area if you're going to put like scratches or dents. They'll show up really, really nicely in those highlights. And it's a good way to like sort of do subtle stuff where it's like not, you know, giant gashes in your chair, but like it does become like noticeable and like nice looking once the light sort of shines over it like that in certain areas. You really do see those details and they pop out quite nicely. Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts, comments?
Yeah, I do. Just for like the old like Western setting, I would say going with like a smaller, like long or like bigger table with like more regular chairs would work better for like like those tables.
Yeah.
Because whenever I think of like an old Western, I always see like, you know, it's like the one dude sitting backwards on his chair playing poker at the poker table or whatever.
Interesting. I can see that. Yeah, I haven't had, to be fair, I don't have a lot of experience with like Western bars. I mean, now, yeah. One thing I might actually say was, if you do decide to keep these tables, again, up to you. It's kind of your decision, but I don't know what state of finish these are. It does feel weird that there's no legs on them. Where like this is something that like totally would exist in like a diner or something today, but like probably I would imagine they wouldn't mount tables into the floor like this, maybe in Western stuff, but no, that's an interesting observation. Fair point.
Yeah,
Yep.
I just want to say that from what the homework was, I didn't know that like I wasn't sure if we had to actually put our teammates' models in, so those are still just the placeholder ones.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I think I completely forgot to say whether or not you guys should do that, so I'm not going to be grading you on incorporating your teammate stuff in. So that's totally fine. Cool. I do still like the stools though. Like I think they have a nice look to them. Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts, comments? All right. Hmm?
Like, it might be cool to have like a little slight frog at the bottom. Like, maybe just close to everything. Just like a little like dressing room or
might be kind of neat. Yeah, or you could do like a little thing where like, however, whenever you end up texturing the floor, you could do a little thing where like, texture this area so it's like a little bit scuffed and like dusty, as if, yeah, like dust is blowing in. That's a really cool suggestion. I like that. Anyone else? Alright. So I have an assortment of random thoughts, in no particular order. First of all, I would like to see how these are mounted to the wall at some point. Especially at this particular render angle, it is kind of obvious that they're just like floating in the doorway. It's so weird to me that these places just have like open doorways like this. Like what is the point of even having this here? But anyway, sorry. So I think most of my comments at this point would be for lighting, and also just like at some point go through and add a little more variation to the positioning of these stools. But in terms of lighting, so I think it would definitely be good to go through. Are you doing Arnold, Unity, Redshift? Okay. Yeah, so I think it would be good to go through, definitely, I mean, like, I'd say, like, at a minimum, throw in a physical sky instead of a dome light like this, or an HDRI into this dome light, because this is going to give you, like, these unmapped dome lights give you really, really flat lighting, which is good for just sort of seeing things, but it's, like, very flat and kind of uninteresting. And then the other thing that I would say, so since you have these, like, really areas where they're, like, pretty exposed, like, you very clearly see past the entrance of this bar and stuff, and, like, wherever your windows are, you can very clearly see out the windows. It's driving me nuts. So that would be something where you might just want to go in and, if you have like a sky dome light here, throw in an HDRI into it. If your HDRI looks fine through the windows, you can leave it. If you want to swap it out for something that's like super old westerny, like you like legitimately just find pictures of an old western town or something on Google. If you go into your sky dome light or whatever you're using, you can turn down the camera visibility to 0, so that it will actually not render in your scene. And basically what that'll do is it'll just render, it'll render your whole image and just leave basically blank spots that are like alphas with transparency for the windows. So then you could literally just, again, find a random Google picture, go into Photoshop, slap it behind your windows, and kind of call it a day. So I would definitely recommend doing something like that for, especially this door scene, because if there's no like termination of this floor, it's going to look really kind of strange. The other suggestion I have for specifically this, how to like terminate this floor in a way that might make sense, and not be a whole lot of extra effort. I feel like a lot of times these will have like little like decks in front of them, if that makes, like, so you could just add some wood planks in here and maybe like some little stilts or something here, so that if that was raised, let me see if I can actually find pictures of it. Old Western bar. The first thing we come up with is that door. All right. So I'm going for something, I don't know what I'm clicking on right now, apparently just an Etsy listing. Great. Oh, it's a miniature. That's nice. All right, so you could do something like this where, like, if this is the front of your bar, you know, add that little, like, raised area here, so that way when you're seeing off the edge of it to whatever you composite in behind it, it's not going to look like the floor is just sort of dropping off into nothingness. And again, that would be something that would be probably pretty easy to do. Just make a few pretty much rectangles. This actually, you could even put some barrels outside or something like that next to a pillar if you wanted to get, like, a little fancier. But I think doing something like that would definitely help sell this scene. Because especially, like, one thing I also look for, apart from, like, wood grain, is if you're going to have open areas like this, how well do they integrate with the rest of your scene? And I think for the, like, day versus night lighting, so what light sources do you have in your scene right now?
Well, I have the dome, obviously, and I have, I think four area lights.
Okay. And are they just sort of like on the ceiling randomly?
Kind of, yeah.
Gotcha. So I think, I forget, do is there electricity by this point in time or no?
Yeah.
Okay. I know I've asked that question like a million times. All right, so one thing that you might consider doing is, for the night lighting, I mean, part of the thing that's disconcerting about this is, like, I can see the dome light here, and it looks bright white, so that's definitely, like, strange to my brain, even if you turn the intensity way down. So I think for night lighting, what you might consider doing is really, like, playing with the color temperature of the light, because I feel like, and again, I could be completely wrong, but it seems like in a lot of these sort of old Western bars, if you look at it, the lighting is very, like, that's a bad example, but it seems like the lighting is a lot warmer, and there'll be sort of like these very targeted lights where you have like these exposed sort of lanterns and stuff like that. So one thing you can consider is, again, if during the day, like, this is mostly windows, so most of the light coming in is probably going to be natural light. It's going to be overpowering your ceiling lamps. What you could do for night is, again, mostly black out the windows unless there's like a street lamp or something, and then really use the color temperature of the ceiling lights to sort of create a different feel in the scene compared to the daylighting, if that makes sense. But I think that would actually be one of the main things that I'd work on is getting the lighting, I guess, a little bit more refined. And really, like, this would be a great example of lighting being a really good way to sort of create a feel and like a vibe in the space. Where, like, this feels maybe a little bit clean for like an old Western bar, I guess. I do also really like the suggestion of like adding a light fog in. I think that would be really cool. Even like an environmental fog where you had, you know, rays of light coming in like through these windows or something like that would also be like super cool looking. But yeah, so any other, I guess, thoughts, questions, comments on this before we go on? Cool. All right. Close all my images. Wahaha. Yes, I keep forgetting to click the button. All right. Nice. All right, cool. And I feel like at this point it's also probably pretty obvious what this one is, but do you want to give us mostly just a quick rundown, I guess, of the objects that you made?
So I did the desk, piggy bank, and teddy bear, along
Cool.
with a bunch of crayons, which are in there.
Nice.
Two, like, one of those, like, clay teacups, and then some cake drawings on top of that.
Nice. I'm curious, I haven't even found the render with them yet, but how did you do the kids' drawings?
Photoshop. And
Nice.
like a brush that kind of looks like a crayon. I don't know if one of my renders like shows them off. They're
Yeah.
all kind of stacked, but I know like in the final one I'll probably have one of just.
Yeah. It's so hard. I've tried to do it before. It's so hard to recreate kids' drawings.
Yeah.
It's like, if you know a kid, just hand them a paper and be like, hey, like, I'll put this in my final, draw me something. But no, I mean, from the scribbly sun I saw, like, whatever brush you found in Photoshop looked pretty good. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, recreating child stuff is always crazy. All right, so any, questions or concerns before we go into crit? All right. Cool. So anybody have any thoughts or comments about any of these renders as I randomly scrub through them?
I really like the table. There's a lot of like mess on it.
Yeah.
I do think it's a bit shiny. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's too reflective to be like a magnetic table, unless it's like one of those tables that they have
Lacquer on them.
lacquer.
Yeah.
But
Like,
I feel like for like a kid's room, like the parents probably they wouldn't like thinking about that probably. So.
yeah. No, I agree with that. I do like the amount of like grime and splatter on here. I was gonna say, yeah, the table is a bit shiny, I think. And then one thing that I would also look at, is I guess at some point, I don't know, I mean, it looks like, I don't know how much refinement you did to like the other maps besides color, but it'd be nice to see, especially for these paint drops, like that would totally be a different shininess than the rest of the table. Also, like a bump map would be usually good. Again, it depends on the kind of paint and like the wood and all that stuff. But yeah, I do think like the tabletop itself is quite nice. And I think as strange as it sounds, I think if you polish that off, it would actually be like a really, really nice backdrop for stuff that's just like good at showing off texturing because it looks cool and nice and like thought out. My only other question, like while I'm at the tabletop, is what are these like black marks?
Up to interpretation. There's like a couple brushes on Photoshop that
Okay.
look like smudges, and I just kind of
Gotcha.
went around with them. I just felt like if it was like a really old table,
Mhm.
probably had something that was dragged on it or painted on.
Yeah,
Scuff marks maybe from like traveling.
fair. So I think one or two of them make sense. I think the fact that there's so many, it's not even the fact that there's so many, it's the fact that I think that they're all black is a little like off-putting. And then if you're going for, so like the tabletop itself looks really nice. If you're looking for additional ways to sort of like polish this and make it look a little bit more natural in other areas would be like, again, the top itself looks really nice, but like get some little chippies on the sides. Like bang up the sides and the corners of this, get some scuff marks on there. There might be some, like a little bit of scuffing on the legs and stuff depending on, you know, how aggressively this is moved. But yeah, and then I think like for stuff like this might be something where you could even still use the shape and still use the brush, but instead of having it be in the color map, make it as if you guys have ever taken like the VST classes and you've seen like those old woodblock tables they have, people like cut on them with X-Acto knives and like the finish is worn off and it like looks super gross. So you could use this as like a bumpness. Why do I keep saying bumpness? As a bump or a roughness map, and just not even do anything with it in color. But just like use it as a way to sort of add a little bit more variation to the texture of the table. But yeah, I mean, I like all the scratches and the paint marks. If I look at this for long enough, I see that there's like repeating little patterns in the scratches. But that took me a while to notice that. But yeah, any other thoughts and comments? Lighting, etc. Do I need to pick a random name out of my little hat? I'm gonna pick a name out of my random little hat. Haha. And I may or may not have accidentally mixed up my classes, so there are some Section 1 people in here. Wait. Kim, have you been, no, you've been saying like a million things, I'm calling someone else. David, any thoughts or comments?
Can we go back to the last picture?
Which one was that? Not this one.
Like the word football rim.
Hold
Yeah, that last picture.
Ah, this one? No.
One after that.
Dang it.
That one, yeah.
Okay.
Shadows, got the desk pads on the floor, like,
Yeah.
again with the floor is really, it looks like a polished wood floor that's like stained, it looks really nice. Yeah, shadows that go from the desk onto the wall are also nice. The carpet is nice, it doesn't have like the same, polish as the floor, which is like what you expect from a carpet. And the crayons on the floor is nice touch as well, the children's room. Good piggy bank.
Piggy bank?
Yeah, that's the, like, for a ceramic piggy bank, that's also really nice for the reflections that it gives off. Kind of expect that for the ceramic material that's used.
Yeah. Is the piggy bank, I see his eyes textured, it's just meant to be a white piggy bank, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Which I would totally buy because I have seen those. I think if you want to do anything with the piggy bank, it might be nice to like, you could fudge in like maybe a little bit more geometry around the legs and like in the ears to kind of round it out. The other thing that you could do is I think I went over I either went over this in class or did like a weird tutorial at it. But there's totally a way where you can sort of fudge low poly objects. So this will work in Maya. It will work in Unity unless something has changed or exploded since the last time I used it. And we have... Why are you doing this? Ah. What is... Oh, I have vert snapping turned on. Ha ha ha. Great. Alright, so there's a way that you can make, if your object like looks a little poly and you ever have like faceting on it like this when you turn it and you don't want that, if you select your object and just go to Mesh Display Soften Edge, you can see, I mean in this case it was like a little weird, but you can see that like as I spin this, it's made no changes to the actual geometry itself. It just looks a lot less faceted. It's basically just playing with the normals of the object to create the illusion of a smoother object. In this case, it did some really horrible things to the top, and there's now these like very awkward shadows here. If you don't want to do the entire object, and you say maybe you just want it around this bottom part, because like the top is fine, and this is a hard edge, so it makes sense for that to be a hard edge. You can grab these, just the edge loops that you want to do, and again, just do a Mesh Display Soften Edge. And in this time, instead of doing the entire object, it's done only the ones around the side. And you can see that there's now no insane, horrid shadowing on the top of this. So again, this should transfer into Unity. I've never had it not transfer into Unity. And if you ever need to undo this, just do Mesh Display and Harden Edge. It'll take it back to that original faceted state. But I mean, you can also try that like on, I'm thinking like specific areas of the legs and like the ears. That might be, you know, a better alternative or a faster alternative than adding extra geometry in. Incidentally, this is a really cool angle for like showing off if you have like scratches and stuff on the table. Because you have those like nice reflections and stuff. I do really like the reflections here. I still think if it was a little less shiny, you'd still have them, and it would still look cool. It would just be a little less shiny. And I do very much like, this is a really cool render angle. I'm a fan of this. It's also neat with the night lighting, because like there's a very clear, I assume you also have like an open door in here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, to me, this really reads as like sort of open door, where it seems like it looks like kind of like a door that's been opened like pretty far, but you get that like really bright lighting here, but then the shadows are still like believable, and it doesn't look like anything's falling so much into blackness that you can't see it, but it does serve to really nicely sort of highlight. For me, my eye goes to like the front of the table and like these little crayons on the floor and like the teacup, this stuff. Which is like, in my mind, kind of like all the stuff that should be shown off in your renders, because it's like all the stuff that you made. It also is like totally shows off these little screws here, and you know I'm kind of a fanatic for like weird screws. Other thought was like it does kind of look like these are floating. Like I might push these a tiny bit closer to the wood. Tiny weird small things, but yeah. And I mean I think like difference between day and night lighting does seem reasonable as far as I'm concerned. I think this one does a really, really nice job of also showing off the space and the lighting, and I think the contrast between these two is like super nice, honestly. Like I think that's very nicely done. I want that view for my window, like just, yeah. But yeah, so any other thoughts, questions, comments on this? Alrighty then. On to the next one. Some part of me, whenever I like open stuff to start grading, I do get really excited because I'm like, I don't need to open every image in Photoshop. Yay! And I'm just like, this is a very sad thing to be excited about. Alright, so I'm just gonna open all of these and close the ones that aren't relevant later. Alright. Alright, cool. So do you want to give us a quick rundown of whose project is this?
Well,
Sweet.
it's going to become it's a pawn shop.
Nice.
So,
Yes.
so that's my decorative object, my cash register, and then my furniture piece is a rusted lamp.
Sweet. Do you like rusty lamps? Do you have your hero object in here? Oh, I see.
It's like part of there, but
Gotcha.
I have it.
I do like how the lamp is like illuminating the side of this. Like that looks pretty cool. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but either way, it looks really cool.
I'm planning on putting like clear glass display case on my hero objects,
Hmm.
because it's a locket. But
Yeah. Oh yeah, like one of those protective, like, don't steal this boxes.
yeah.
Nice. No, that makes sense. One thing you could actually consider doing if you're doing one of those, a lot of times they'll have like little teeny like LED strips at the top or something to like light it from the inside. If you were looking for like an extra way to add some like interesting lighting to your scene, that might be something to consider. But yeah, cool. So anyone have any thoughts and comments about, this is not your lamp, thoughts and comments about any of these renders?
I think the Patrick looks really good. All the wear in it. I think there's like I think you only barely see the desk. I think there's a little bit too much wear maybe on the desk or whatever it's sitting on.
Oh, the,
Patrick's.
this thing?
If you get the closer shot, you can see down there it's really thick and heavy. I think you might actually even be able to just keep that on there, just maybe just lighten up the blacks a little bit to make it look less intense.
I was actually going to say, what material is that? Or like what is that supposed to be on the cash register?
It's supposed to be like a slightly shiny wood, because it's not like the top or the body. It's like kind of like a gold metal type thing.
Right.
But then the bottom part is like wood.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, so I think, yeah, now that I look at that, I think honestly the main thing that I would say, so this is a texture for cracking paint. So if this is supposed to be like scratched, so like what it looks like to me right now is like a painted metal, where the paint is for some reason like crackling off. I think if you honestly kind of just like slapped a wood texture on here and got rid of this texture, this specific texture for wear, then it would probably do more like what you wanted.
For the reference photo, it didn't really look like wood texture. It just looked like it would be.
Yeah.
It's just like there's not like much.
Okay. Oh, this.
Painted.
So this is actually not wood. This is sheet metal that's been rolled. I get like super excited by like this stuff. But yeah, so this looks like basically a sheet of aluminum where they've rolled the sides over. And the reasons I come to that conclusion is for some reason I do a lot of research about metalwork, but also if you look on like the scratches do look like they're actually showing metal under it. But yeah, so I think, I mean, if that's the case, you could totally get away with just like keeping that as like the weird sort of like paint color that's there, because I do think that actually does look pretty similar. I think what I would do in that case is actually just maybe make it like the metal base underneath if you were going for that. If you wanted to make it wood, honestly, like that's fine, that's whatever. But if you wanted to keep the metal, again, I would pick a different pattern for the scratches, and then just like punch in some like metal-y color underneath that. And you can look at sketch roast is actually a pretty good example of subtle wear, where it has like right around here, you can see scuff marks like mostly on the edges. There's some over here, and then like right down here, like in the crevices that probably don't see a lot of use, and like especially in these little corners and stuff, there's a lot of not rust, but like patinaing or something. I don't know, some like dark grimy stuff. This is actually a really interesting example of texturing. You definitely get that a lot like in here. This is a really pretty cash register. It's a fun object to do. Yeah, and then like I think for the sides, so I like all the different like variations and stuff in the scratches that you've done. Definitely watch out for texture stretching. That would probably be like one of the first things, especially So here's my bit. If you're gonna render it from the side, you should fix the texture stretching. If you wanted to strategically choose a different angle to render from, where that's not as obvious, that's also an option. But I think one thing that you could also maybe do that would, I think, make this maybe a little bit more realistic is, so what kind of wear, like, did you give any thought to what caused this wear?
Like the
Or, like, yeah, like, fair. All right. So that a lot of times, like, if I'm adding wear to an object, I'm thinking about like what caused it. So in this case, I mean, just visually looking at this, I'm thinking the white marks kind of look like paint to me, which is actually why I asked, like, where was this exposed to paint? Which, like, honestly, a pawn shop, I could maybe believe that. But so I'm looking, like, if you look at this, if you're shooting to like recreate this as closely as possible, it looks like most of the wear, it seems like the metal is actually in pretty good condition. Like, it's not crazy scratched. It's mostly just like grimy, and most of that grime is just like edge crud from like creases.
I mean, for my intention for the cash register, it was just like I wanted to be scratched up and
Right.
like super old, like it's been like dented and stuff, or like
Yeah.
like use an accused honestly. So
Yeah.
that was my intention for it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I just used the reference as like a
Reference. No, that's fair. Yeah, so I mean, if you want to do that, I think definitely some kind of bumper normal map would be good for the dents. And then I still think just give a little bit maybe more thought as to like specifically what kind of damage it has. And I'm not saying like go and make like a whole backstory of like, I know exactly where this has been for the last 300 years, but like, if you want like scratches and dents, think of, you know, again, what was scratching it? Was this like dropped on concrete and then kicked by accident and like abraded by concrete? Would not want to kick this object. Or was it just like repeated use? Maybe someone had, like, the operator had a bunch of rings on and they would like keep their hand on the sides, so there'd be like small scratches from the rings, like that kind of stuff. I do think some corner grime might be nice for this. And then there's also like a teeny bit of pulling right here. It looks like one edge loop kind of running this way would pretty much fix that. I also like the fact that it looks like it's glowing, but like I kind of like that. But yeah. Alright. I do think I don't know what it is, like you lose a lot of detail in this, but I also think it's like kind of interesting and moody. I like that you have these little like hot highlights here, and this would also be one of those things where if you had more variation in the either like bump maps or like roughness maps, especially for these corners, like these highlights would pick that up super nicely. So this would be one of those interesting lightings to really like sort of push the texturing on the cash register, because it would show it off really nice. This one feels like it's maybe getting a little dark. So this is like obviously your night lighting. And there's like the lamp here.
Yeah, that's like the light source.
Okay, that's the only light source?
Well, I added another light source in order to show more, 'cause, like
This is really dark.
yeah, the light source. If I only had the lamp,
Mhm.
it would be like you could barely see it. At all.
Right.
So I added another light source like near the camera and then to like
Right.
to see some detail at least. But
No, that makes sense. So I was actually going to say, I'm all for adding like additional light sources. In this case, what might potentially make more sense, because I'm looking at this and it's actually kind of strange, because like the cash register itself is like the literal darkest part of the image, and that's like the most complex and visually interesting piece of this image. So what you might consider doing is throwing in just like a random sconce on the wall, honestly, or like make some kind of wall fixture. It doesn't even need to be in frame. But if there was a light, again, like on the wall or someone else, that would just like target this little area and light this up maybe a little bit more from the top and or more directly, that would potentially be a way to make this a little bit more visible. I think the other thing that's like kind of off-putting about this is like the walls here are super bright, but it doesn't like. I think I can see the see the light that you added by the camera a little bit maybe too much in the renders. Where like these lights seem really bright, but the only visible light source is this.
I just haven't touched it the whole.
Yeah, which honestly could be part of it because like Lambert Gray always looks like fluorescent, crazy stuff. But yeah, so I mean, I definitely think that like getting the cast register a bit brighter would definitely help. But I do like the sort of moody lighting that you have. It is interesting. Anyone else have any thoughts, comments? Gonna draw a random name. Last thought for random comments. All right. Hiya. Ah. Jason. Wait. Is Jason in this class, or is he my section 1 class? Oh, hello. Cool, sorry. Any thoughts and comments on any of these renders?
Well, in the lighter lamp one,
This one?
yeah, the sort of base piece of the crane arm looks like, yeah, the textures on that look pretty warped.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, actually the other two crane textures or crane arms look really bare compared to the longer one too. But the actual shape part of it looks really good as well as the fluff.
Yeah. No, I would agree with these things. Anyone else have any thoughts on the lamp? That's not a lamp. Yeah, so I do agree honestly it's not so much the positioning I think that's strange. I think it might just be like, is there any bump map on this?
I think I forgot to add a bump map on that. I did add a bump map on the head.
Yeah. This one I can definitely tell because you have, if you scroll in and look at like these teeny little dots, you do have those like nice highlights from the bump map. So I do like this area. I think it's an interesting wear pattern. It seems like it kind of stops like partway up the lamp. It might be nice to maybe see some stuff up here as well. But again, I do think the area, especially on this part, is nice. I also like these little clippy bits. These little bits of wear here on the corner where the light's catching, where the shine is sort of occluded, does also look pretty cool. But yeah, I do agree. So I think this area feels like maybe a little bit much, especially in comparison with the rest of the lamp. Honestly, I feel like you could get away with doing, if you wanted to, like a similar texture from this on some areas of here, and maybe just like, again, just sort of making this a bit more subtle. But yeah, I do think the lamp does look pretty neat. My only that faded off into nothing. I don't know. I like all the screws you have on here. Like I really like the hardware. I think is cool looking. And then my only other comments, and this is like weird small things. I'm also like weird, like if you put cables in your scene, I also get like weirdly fixated on cables, and this just goes for like people in general. And again, if you have a reference, like no worries. Usually if I see a cable coming out of something, there'll be a little bit of like a hard rubber thing. Like it won't come out at such an angle, it'll kind of come out a little bit straighter. And then it's usually, and again, some people just like abuse like their cables and phone chargers, and they're like bent at crazy angles. If that's what happened here, cool. I would honestly believe that because it's like kind of a more worn lamp. But then the other thing that I usually look for with cables is how well do they sit on whatever surface they're on. So in this one, like it looks like it's kind of just sort of like wrapped around here, which I feel like makes sense. I think if the cable is hanging off the edge of the desk, gravity would probably just drag this straight down like off the desk. But I do like the detail that it's sort of in there. I don't know. I do get weirdly fixated on cables. And then why? This one looks like the cable's a lot shiny. Like it almost looks like there's a metal piece on the cable right here.
Yeah, I like, for the other render, I like changed
Ah,
Or increase the roughness.
okay. I think I like it with increased roughness better. And actually, are you rendering this in Maya?
No, Redshift.
Redshift.
Maya Redshift.
Fair. I guess when I say Arnold, I mostly mean Maya and not Unity. But one thing you could do is turn on global illumination for this, and that would actually do a lot. So that honestly, that I don't think it would light up your scene enough to like illuminate the cash register from the other render, but it would definitely push a little bit more light into the background in a way that I think would be very believable. So in this case, I'm all for like shadowy, moody lighting that sort of falls off to nothingness. I do that a lot because I just think it looks neat. But in this case, this is maybe like so much of it is falling off into blackness that like punching that little bit of global illumination in would help get a little bit more light on the wall and have that fall off maybe be a little bit more natural. In a way that also requires very little effort on your part to make look decent. So it might just be worth like turn it on. If you don't like it, turn it back off. But I do like this lighting. I think it's quite interesting. One thing you also might consider is a lot of times they won't paint the inside of these tins or these like little lampshades. They'll use the inside as like a metal reflective part to help amplify the lighting in there. So you could almost just like take the texture off that inside if you wanted to. But again, that's a relatively small thing. I really do like how the light shines across the chain and stuff. That just looks neat. But yeah, cool. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Cool. Oh. On a completely unrelated side note, if you guys ever find that clicking a lot on a mouse all day makes your hands or wrists sore, you can switch to a tablet, and Maya operates like pretty well with a tablet. And that, at least for me, will fix those issues. I say that randomly because my hand is starting to hurt by clicking all day. All right, so
This one's mine. Yeah,
Cool.
So I have lighting issues and I just ran out of time, so I submitted just a broken homework should be done today. To be submitted.
gotcha.
And then
Cool.
the last picture shows the lighting's just becoming.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Control I was messing around with the render settings and I kind of made it worse. So
Yeah.
I still
Um,
said that. I was like, that was kind of
Fair. How were you lighting this?
I was using spotlights, messing around.
Are you in Redshift
No,
when you were using spotlights?
what is the Arnold? There is an Arnold.
Area light?
Yeah.
Okay. So no, I was like, don't be using Maya spotlights. All right, sorry. So yeah, so area lights. What settings were you playing with to try to adjust sampling?
Remember the exact name, just the abbreviations like the SSS.
Okay, so you were mostly in like this area.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is probably, looking at this might be something you have to edit in the light itself. So there's two thoughts I have on the sampling for this. One, if you have an HDR that's like shining through a bunch of walls, basically, like that will a lot of times create sampling like this. If you don't have that, then I would look in the individual area light itself. So if I throw in an area light, if you just open that up in the attribute editor, play with this little samples tab here for the individual light. That I would bet like 95% certainty that would fix the issues. So if you ever put in a light, usually I'll edit these samples first before I start doing the global settings. Because as annoying as it is to have access to like all the different samples for each individual light, it does help you really be able to optimize your render times. But also half the time, when I first started rendering with Arnold, I didn't realize this was here, and I was like putting this up to 13 and it still looked terrible. But yeah, so just like in each individual light, and this goes for HDR lights as well, there is a sampling tab which you can edit.
So increase that tab?
Yeah. Usually for these, I'll probably have to set it up, especially if it's like dark, shadowy lighting, it'll usually be like way grainier. You might need to set it up somewhere from like 3 to 5 is what I find works pretty decently. just like a note about sampling in general. So if you guys are ever looking for a way to like potentially speed up your render times, again, you can optimize each different light so it shadows smoothly on its own. For these settings here, if you don't have, like, you can straight up go in and like set some of these down to 0. So volume indirect is for like environmental fog, that kind of stuff. If you have none of that in your scene, set it to 0. SSS is subsurface scattering, so that'd be stuff like skin if you've used a preset for like jade or something like that. And this also goes for redshift too. They have pretty much all the same settings, but if you've done anything in subsurface here, so if this weight is like set to anything with 0, this is saying that you have subsurface scattering turned on. If you have no subsurface scattering, if your weight is at 0, turn this all the way down. Transmission, if you have any glass or water in your scene, definitely leave this turned on. If you don't, set it to 0. Most of the stuff for like diffuse and specular and camera is like all you need for basic renders if you're not doing like, again, glass, subsurface scattering, or like environmental fog. So this is all stuff that you can just sort of turn off if you don't have any of that stuff in your scene. And sometimes that'll help increase your render time. Not like crazy dramatically, but like enough. Yep.
If it doesn't take too much time, could you just make like a quick email with those notes in it?
Sure. I will also have, make a note of that. Haha. Where am I going? Yeah, so I mean, I'll also have the class recording up. You can take a look at that. But yeah, I can totally send out an email with that. I'll send out an email with, again, the final times, some other, like the service desk IT email, and like a bunch of other weird stuff. But yeah, so that's the stuff I would look at mostly for your settings. I find like most of the time, the settings I need to do are like in the individual lights, unless it's like some kind of crazy specular thing, in which case I would just like take this setting up here. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do like the lighting. I feel like it shows off the contours of the sword nicely, where it's like actually pretty cool where this is like lit from the bottom, which I would assume by the shape of this light that this is the night lighting, and there's a lamp down here.
The lighting's actually coming from the ceiling that's reflecting off
What?
the glass table. Or
Do you have like a bunch of GI turned on?
I think that I shouldn't.
That's like crazy reflective. I mean, it looks cool. Also, if your light is this upside down? Because if your light's coming from the ceiling, the shadow is facing upwards.
I just realized that too.
So I'm wondering if
The
you're...
lights are coming from the ceiling because it's right. And this is not upside down.
That's super weird. I mean, either way, I find it interesting. It just looks like there's a lamp down here. So I just look at that and just make sure your lights are coming from where you expect and you don't like have an extra one turned on. But yeah, so I mean, I just, you know,
And then the other two
keep
are
plugging
just
along.
reference images.
Gotcha. Yeah. I do like the chair. It's satisfying in a sickly vinyl sort of way. And I say sickly vinyl with the greatest of affection because I love vinyl chairs. But yeah, cool. Yeah, and if you go as you're working, if you have any questions, just shoot me an email. Any other questions or anything while I'm pulling up other people's stuff?
I don't know, it's just a lighting.
Cool. Hiya. Ah, yes. Dingus. And I keep forgetting to check the button to turn on. Holy crap, this is like a bajillion renders. Are these renders all
That's mine. I thought you meant like two renders of each object during each, like 2 day, 2 night for each object, so it's one.
wow, okay.
So, yeah.
Let's pull them all open. It's all good. Sweet propane tank. I see you've retextured the sword. Oh my god, this is like dizzying. Okay. It's all good. Is there shiny stuff here, or like what? It looks like there's some sampling stuff, and I'm thinking it's specular, but I can't tell.
Yeah, so like there is something, but also like so I'm using redshift and I don't really know how to do that. So like
Gotcha.
I'm trying to map any specular stuff, but it's not working. Like I don't know.
map in the specular stuff. Oh, is in like, oh, for like metals and stuff.
Yeah.
Redshift is super weird with metals.
Yeah, I can't figure out how to
Um,
use it.
Yeah. No, I love Redshift. It is. Oh, God damn it. It is crazy weird for metals. That's like one of the reasons why I'm usually just like end up not using it because there's like 5 different settings for it. I've yet to find like a really good description of how to do different maps for different metals, which is like very frustrating. But yeah, so that might be something where you could just go in and just sort of, honestly, if it's like crazy blurry in the back. Speaking of crazy blurry in the background, I do like the crazy blurry in the background. I like that sort of highlights, this hammer and stuff. But like for this particular image, you could just sort of brute force it and go through in Photoshop and just be like, ha ha ha, what if I just erase these? But yeah, if I find any good resources about like how to metal in Redshift, I will email you guys and let you know. You get to see my weird like back end note taking. But yeah, cool. I am a fan. Like I do think that this. I do like the wood texture, I think, for this. Yeah. What is this like lizard skin?
It's, so I have, like last night I had everything mapped for Arnold, so I put it over to Redshift for the maps. It didn't transfer right, but it's supposed to be kind of like bumpy.
Right.
And also I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this because I don't like it, so you don't have to go too hard with the critique.
Fair. I was actually gonna say like I don't. A, this would look awesome 3D printed. B, I'm not sure it fits with the room itself.
Yeah.
But I do like the colors if you're ever going for like a woodland shield kind of effect for like forest creatures. But yeah. I also like what you've done with the, I guess, paint effect spines.
Yeah.
Sweet. And is this a low or high poly scene? I ask because horseshoes.
It's high poly, but those are like stuff I just added in last night. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. But yeah, cool. And then is this just like wallpaper?
It's like a tapestry.
Okay. And I forgot to actually do the thing. Do you want to just give a quick rundown of like what your scene is?
Oh yeah, sure. It's a blacksmith forge.
Cool. Modern day, I take it? Or no?
That was one from like older.
Okay.
It's abandoned in the woods somewhere.
Gotcha. All right, cool. So, if I were a blacksmith, I think I would be terrified to put a tapestry in there if I'm working with hot metal. Also, the fact that like you're working with hot metal and there's probably like a forge running, like from a practical standpoint, like tapestries were mostly used for warmth and also decoration, but mostly warmth. You have a giant furnace in that room, like it's gonna be plenty hot in there. So I might take that out if it were me personally. Yeah, I think like if it was like a mosaic or something, I think it would make more sense. But like, that's a hardcore fire hazard. And then what were the 3 main objects you made?
There's that vice thing.
This
there's
thing?
Tongs, a hammer, and then a propane tank.
Okay. All right, cool. So this is your vise,
Yeah.
and then is this the table that Elliot made? Okay. All right, cool. Yeah. So I definitely like the vise. I think the textures and the wear on that are like really cool, and the angles you've shown to show them off are also pretty cool. This one seems a little out of focus, which I assume was like a render setting.
Oh, I also had a question.
Yep.
This one, there's like texture, like all the UVs are lined up and stuff, but like, you see where the rust, like on the left, like bottom arm, like where the rust, like at the top of the square? Like,
What?
over-
Oh,
like right there.
this?
It's kind of, it's like supposed to overlap onto there, but like, I can't figure out why it doesn't, because all the UVs line up and stuff. I don't know, I don't know.
That's very weird.
Yeah.
Are you doing anything procedural with this, or just?
No, it's just mapping.
That is super. It is right here, right?
Yeah.
That is super weird. Do you have your textures hanging around?
I don't.
All right. If you have your files, I can take a look at that in the open lab. Otherwise, shoot me an email with that, and I can take a look at that. I spent 2 hours troubleshooting like a ZBrush thing with UVs, and it was like the stupidest easy solution ever. I was so pissed. Anyway. But yeah, cool. So anyone, I guess, as I scroll through these numerous renders, this looks like terrifying dental tools, and no. But yeah, I mean, I think all the render angles you've chosen are like really interesting. I think this one's like really cool. Anyone else have any thoughts and comments on like the lighting or any of the render angles, composition, etc.?
The HDRI, and honestly, generally most of the textures and lighting you use look pretty good. I think you can definitely have, there's definitely a distinction between day and night.
Mm-hmm.
That also looks really nice.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think in this one, I like how the HDR is blown out, or like blurred out in the background. I don't find that really off-putting in this case, and I think part of the reason that I don't find that off-putting, for one, it looks like it's just sort of like far away out a window, so like it would make sense for that to be blurry anyway. But I think the depth that you've managed to capture on the renders also helps with that, where you have like a very clear, in most of your renders, like foreground, middle ground, background. The fact that this is like so far in the background, usually that ends up being blurrier, so like I would totally buy that. Also, the fact that you do in your renders actually add in depth of field, that also totally helps sell that should be blurry in the background. But yeah, no, I do think your lighting is really nice between day and night. And also, this is a good example of, I think, it seems like some of them could maybe be a little bit brighter in certain areas, but it is a really good example of sort of using the light that's coming into the room to highlight specific areas of texturing and stuff that's happening, especially like this one with the vice. You have this sort of, no idea what this HDR is in the background, but like, it has this really like nice shadow coming across the vice. So even though you're losing a lot of detail like in the front of it, you still get this really clear silhouette of what it is, as well as, again, showing off interesting features of the texturing there. So I do think that is like pretty nicely done in this. Oh my god. Well, I'm curious to see, like, I haven't really seen the propane tanks yet.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so any other thoughts and comments as I scroll through these in no particular order? This one I feel like, and again, some of these, because like, you did clearly like way more renders than were necessary, so like, this one I might just sort of call out, maybe. I would do one of two things with this. So this one, the tongs blend in with the background. And I'm torn, because part of me really likes this background and all the little vines in it. And part of me is like, but extra effort to like light these. Are these tongs floating?
Yeah. I was like, why did she want to render like just the object? So I don't know.
The fact that it took me a solid 30 seconds to realize that was floating, because I was like, wow, this is just like an interesting compositional render. But yeah, so I mean, you could totally just like not do this render. I do think the background is really cool. Like, is this like a trellis these vines are growing on?
Yeah.
It looks cool. It's like very like interesting patterns and textures. But yeah, and I think this, if this is daylight, this one feels maybe a little bit dark. Especially because I think the windows are right here, yeah? Yeah, so this one feels like maybe it could be a little bit lighter. Render 2, but I don't like it. Yeah, so I think I really like that one. I think in some of the daylight renders, the stuff could be maybe a little bit brighter. Like, I think the background actually looks really cool in this. To the point where I would almost say it would be interesting to get a render without the hammer here. I assume this is one of the ones where you're like, why does she want a render of just the hammer? So I do actually think that this is like the background of this it seems like pretty successful in terms of like showing off the overall space. So I might just like get rid of the hammer, keep the angle, and then like unblur out the background, and then you'd have just like a cool render of a bunch of the stuff in your shop. Yeah, so it seems like the lighting holds up pretty well in most of the stuff except the weird like floating object renders. And then for a few of the daylight ones, mostly the ones I think focusing on the vice, it seems like maybe there could be a little bit brighter areas. But overall, I do think that this is a really cool space. And actually, because I remember looking at your Maya file, I think this would be, it'd be interesting to get some more renders of the overall space, because it is very nicely populated with like a bunch of sort of stuff in it. And it would be nice to like see that in more renders, because clearly there's a bunch of work put into it. And you laid the bricks. You actually laid the bricks. Which honestly, I 100% do that because I despise texturing bricks. It's so annoying to me. But yeah, I mean, like, I think overall, like, this looks really nice. Yeah, cool. Any other questions, comments, etc.? All right then. Oh my God, closing all of these. I think I might just close Photoshop and reopen it. It's okay. Show the extracted files, dang it. Haha. It's a race with the zip folder. Cool. Alrighty then. Ooh, that's weird. Alright. Cool. So, whose object is this? And do you want to give us a quick rundown of what the scene is?
This one's mine.
Cool.
I apologize for not having more renders because I was rendering these images like 40 minutes before the section time.
Gotcha.
So we're gonna, also my room isn't complete because I kind of messed it up the first time, so I'm gonna redo it.
Gotcha.
And,
Watch the floor gaps.
yeah, all that fun stuff.
Yep.
I just put up walls.
Gotcha.
But yeah, share, the axe is my hero object. I have a close-up render of that one.
Yes.
There's the candle holder on the bench.
This guy?
Yeah.
Sweet.
We're going for like a kind of like a Viking age kind of workshop.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Yeah, so I mean, obviously there's like work and stuff to be done on the room itself. So I think in terms of the textures that you have, or like, I mean, obviously by the end, like, floor gaps, make sure nothing's floating.
Yeah.
I do think the axe sits quite nicely on the wall, and I like the texture that you have for the handle. Like, from far away, that looks pretty cool. And it looks like a worn, gross piece of wood. Has a very satisfying feel to it. I also like this little sort of like, I guess not an inlay, but like indented little carved design on this axe. I think that's a cool touch. Seems like maybe there could be a little bit more scratches on here. But yeah. And then I assume that do you want any feedback on like the lighting since the room isn't finished, or say again? Say again?
Yes, definitely.
Cool. All right, so open it up to other people. Anyone have any thoughts and comments on the lighting? Also, is there anything we should know about your scene in terms of like where the light should be coming from?
It is coming from two windows in the back.
Okay, so back being like kind of this.
Behind the camera.
Okay.
The wall adjacent to the one that's in the scene.
Okay. It's been like 10 years since I've taken geometry, and I had to think about what adjacent meant. I'm like, oh God, it's okay. All right, so anyone have any thoughts and comments about the different lightings? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so your daylighting is a little too light. You should probably add like a active like yellow or something to make it seem more active or something like that. As you said, it's working with it.
Yeah.
Should I be using an HDRI for all the lighting, or should I add like directional lights and just flood it out?
You can do. So I would use probably area lights for Arnold. If you're talking about like the Maya directional lights. But you're welcome to use HDRs. You're welcome to do your own custom lighting. It's really like up to you and whatever you feel best achieves the look you're going for. I feel like most people have been doing a combination of HDRs. Just get a little bit of color variation in the lighting. So a combination of HDRs and then adding additional area lights wherever they need them. And then also if you're doing, so you're going for like Viking Workshop.
Yeah. So it's gonna be like mostly stone on the inside, I think.
Okay. So yeah, so to be fair, I don't have a lot of experience with Viking stuff. This is gonna sound really stupid. Have you ever seen How to Train Your Dragon?
Yes.
Watch it while you're doing your lighting and just like, yeah,
Okay.
it's a really nicely lit movie. Also, like, the setting makes sense in terms of, you know, the project. But I was gonna say, so for the night lighting, if you're doing, it seems like this is like overall a little bit bright for night lighting, where, especially if it's like hardcore night lighting.
One of the issues I was having with night lighting was like trying, if I made it too dark, it was really staticky.
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
if I made it, so the more like dimmer I made it, the more staticky it just got, like
Yep.
blurry render. So I mean, I assume that stuff could be kind of like phased out through the render settings.
Yeah. So I was actually gonna say, so what kind of lighting are you using for these scenes? Okay.
Instead of like an HDRI and area light.
Okay, so usually if you put in an HDR, you map something into it, or is it just not map dome light?
I think it's just like a world light.
World light?
Yeah.
Wait. Which light? Sky dome?
Yeah, that one.
Okay. Yeah, it's all good. Alright, so usually, especially if you put an HDR in this, and especially if you make them dim, they do tend to get like pretty sampley. This is gonna be a terrible demo. Alright, so one thing that you usually need to do is just in your light, go into your attribute editor, and again, just take the samples up to something a little bit more. I find that usually with most HDRs I put in, and this is assuming that there's like a map on this, I'll have to bump it up to at least 3 to get something not completely gross. I have found some that are like incredibly demanding in terms of sampling, and those are usually either super dark HDRs for like night scenes, or like crazy rainbow theaters that are all kinds of trippy colors. But like for a standard HDR, usually 3 is pretty good. And then for your lighting, same thing. So if you have area lights in here, just go into the samples and in the light itself and bump that up. That's usually the first thing I'll do, and then at the end, if none of that works, I'll go in and start editing these like global settings. But again, usually that'll sort of take care of most of my issues. But yeah, so what I was going to suggest, apart from just like spam watching all of the How to Train Your Dragons, I still haven't seen the third one yet, and I need to, if it's even in theater. If you give me spoilers, don't even give me spoilers. I meant to go to the, okay, sorry, I digress.
Everyone dies.
Alright, sorry. So I was gonna say for the night lighting, obviously there's like a little bit of light from the moon, but you could also just do, like put in some little torches and then make some little fires for them. And that could be as simple as mesh lights, but that would really sort of play on the sort of orangey lighting. That would really help differentiate it from the day lighting, which would be presumably at least less aggressively orange. But yeah, I think that would give you a pretty interesting look as well. Because like if you had, I'm picturing for some reason like a torch. If this is going to be, I don't know what the actual room layout you're going for is, but if you're going for like torch on the wall here, and torch on the wall here, that would probably give you some really interesting shine on this axe, light up the table, and then cast some interesting shadows on the chair. So you'd be able to see everything, but it wouldn't be like uniformly lit, if that makes sense. I'm gonna keep saying it, but like How to Train Your Dragon also does night lighting really nicely. But yeah, and then I think for the day lighting, I mean this one, I can't tell if you actually have a wall in here or not. I think it would be good to get in, like, this particular render seems a little bit blown out, which makes me think maybe there's just sort of like a wall with a big light behind it, where like the wall isn't there. But I would watch out for that as well. But yeah. Anyone else, or any more thoughts, questions, comments from you or anyone else?
Yeah, I really like the axe and the chair. I mean, one thing that I can definitely say that you could improve your axe is honestly just like, I think it's a little too shiny. And if it was like newly made, it would make sense. The fact that you have scratches on there makes me feel that it should be less shiny. And then I feel like you could do one small like change in the geometry with
Mhm.
on where the actual axe blade is.
This bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just kind of looks black, but it's like against the wall. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be the shadow. That's what it is.
Yeah, part of it I think is definitely the lighting. But yeah, no, I don't agree. I don't disagree with any of that. I was actually gonna say, so when you were saying like I don't know what your geometry is like, I thought you were gonna say like put a little nick in it, and that would actually be interesting if you had, if it would take like 2 seconds, you could put like a little chip or something in the axe.
Could do it through my box.
What?
Can I do it through my box?
Probably better to geometry that in. But yeah, I don't disagree. This does feel maybe a little bit. I don't think it's necessarily too shiny. Like if, like especially like filed metal, which is basically or like ground metal edges on axes and stuff, usually are shiny. But I do feel like there's a little bit of a discrepancy. Like you have this really nice looking worn blade handle here, or wooden handle here, and this looks a little bit new. So what you could do is just go in with a map for like roughness, maybe a slight bump map like you have with this, and then just go in and just sort of add some like scratches and stuff or like little chips to the handle, maybe the rest of the axe. I think that would actually go a long way to really making that feel like a little bit more uniform and complete. I really do like the handle, but yeah. Anything else? Cool. And as always, if you have questions as you go, just like let me know. Shoot me emails. I've been like, it's been weird. Like the last few days, I've been compulsively checking my email for like stuff from you guys, and I just like haven't been getting emails. I'm like, this is weird. Normally I get like 3 emails a day from you guys. All right. Haha. All the lightings. Okay. It is. Sometimes from the thumbnails, I'm like, I don't know which one's the reference image and which one isn't. All right, cool. So, I mean, I feel like, again, this one's like pretty obviously the kid's bedroom. Do you want to just like really quick go over the different objects that you made for this project?
Yeah, so I did the lamp and the rocking chair in the back.
This guy? Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. And then was that decorative and hero? Oh,
Decorative.
furniture. Did you have a hero object for this?
Yeah, but I thought we were just focusing on the decorative renders.
Gotcha. I think that was supposed to be testing the hero object as well, because that was it was supposed to be going off sort of the renders for this, but that's fine for this week. All right, cool. So any questions or concerns before we go into crit? All right, shoot. I see you have comments.
One thing I wanted to add, just kind of how he said he thought that you were only supposed to do like, you weren't supposed to do any renders of your object, because I did the same. And I think the reason why we both thought that is because it says like having 8 renders, and then two renders of each object of day and then of night. So like 2 day, 2 night of the same object. And then the new objects that we put in were the decorative and the furniture.
Oh,
So
wait.
that adds up to 8. So that's why at least for me, that's why I did that.
Right. Was this? Okay, so this is this one.
Yeah, this is 8 renders total. So that's why and because we already had the focus
Ah.
on the hero object, that's why I
Right. Okay, yeah. Sorry. All right, cool. So I was mostly talking. So for those renders, I was talking specifically about the background objects assignment, where it says do this stuff in engine. Yeah. So sorry about that. That was my bad. That was a bit unclear. All right, cool. So yeah. So I'm not gonna like take any points for that off. I wasn't really planning on doing that anyway, but especially since I did word that a little bit weirdly. Yeah, so yeah, if you guys didn't render your hero object, like don't worry about that. Yeah, sorry for the confusion. Did I, really quick, I'm curious now. Did I link? Okay, cool. Good. All right. Cool. All right, so I guess questions and comments, or any thoughts or comments on any of these renders?
Yeah, there was the shot with the lamp.
This one.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot of noise on the shadow.
Yeah. I do. Yeah. No, there's totally some noise.
I had the same issue with like in game, in scene, not like from world lighting or the illumination, where like
Okay, so it's just like individual lights
a
causing
lot
issues.
of noise, no matter what I do with the sliders.
Right.
It doesn't a lot.
Did you try? This one's actually weirdly like a little bit harder to pinpoint what exactly the sample's coming from. Did you try the light
Yeah.
samples itself in the light, like the light itself?
Yeah. Like
Okay.
both sides. I mean, I don't know what he had done or what his lights were like, but maybe you could.
Yeah, and this one I'm actually okay. Yeah, cool. So I don't think I asked for the Maya file. But yeah, so I was like looking at this. I'm like, it's all samply, and then I'm like, normally it's the shadows that are samply, and in this case it's the lit areas, which is weird.
Yeah, I'm using the mesh light.
Okay.
That might be why.
Yeah, mesh lights do tend to be a little bit more samply.
I had it on like candles on the plans.
Yeah. No, sometimes for mesh lights you do just need to bump the samples up like way higher than you do for other lights, because they do sometimes just create a really weird samply effect. In this particular instance, I mean, less relevant like for your candles, but maybe not. I was gonna say what you could conceivably do is put in 2 area lights, so like one pointing directly out and then one pointing directly back, and make sure that they're sandwiched perfectly against each other. So that way, because theoretically that way there wouldn't be any kind of like seam where there was no light in between the 2 area lights. And you would probably still get all of that like little bright glow on the inside of the lamp, and then just have light shooting out each side. In this case, that might be a viable option. Otherwise, you might just need to like just bump your samples up
Would you
higher.
recommend some point? A point light?
Like a, are you using Redshift?
In Unity.
Oh, in Unity, yeah. If you want to use, well, to be honest, I really don't. I haven't played around with lighting in Unity, so I'm just gonna say in Unity, I don't super care what you do as long as it doesn't look completely horrendous.
Okay.
And by completely horrendous, the stuff I'm looking for, like in this case, would be really like a crazy hard shadow, where there's like no feathering at all. Really like aggressive hard shadows are usually, for Maya lights, usually that's how I can tell. It's because it's like a really hard shadow. So the same stuff I would try to avoid in Unity, if possible.
Also with lighting in Unity, we'll probably talk about this later, but I'm sure other people are rendering in Unity. There's like no ambient occlusion at all.
There is a.
It looks kind of yeah.
Let me.
Like my helmet resting on the throne, and
Yeah.
it just kind of looks, like that weird floating thing.
Right.
Ambient occlusion.
You can absolutely bake in maps for ambient occlusion. It is a weird semi-convoluted process that I know when we did it for our senior project, it took like 8 hours per bake, but that was also for like a full like giant town scene. But there is a way to do that. I can look it up, but usually that's like a separate texture map that you can add in, and I think you can add it. Like for our scene, we ended up basically breaking up our entire scene. So we had one UV grid with like every piece of geometry in it. We just baked all of that out, and it was awful and took forever, but then we could put that into Unity and just basically use that map to do stuff. So there are ways to do it. I'm just not inherently familiar with it, but I can try to look that up and see if I can send you some stuff. But yeah, I do really like this lighting though. Like I don't know, it's very interesting. One random thing before we go super crazy into crit. Would I be wrong in guessing that this ball was textured with I think it's like the Maya default bulge texture or something? Okay. Personally, I might tweak that. I I mean, for one, it's really shiny. I don't know how far you went into the texturing, but A, I've never seen a child's ball that was textured in this way, and B, this does look like a Maya default bulge texture, like, a lot. So that might be something to just sort of like swap it out for something else. Like you could even use just like a ramp texture and make it look like a little beach ball or something. Would honestly might be a little bit more natural looking. But yeah. Honestly though, you could probably modify this and turn it into like something disco ball like if you ever needed to. But yeah. Anywho. All right. So did I ask you any like questions before I went into crit? Or no? Alright. This like, I assume this is a day render, but like, I would totally buy this as like a sunset render. Alright, so anyone have any comments about like room layout, lighting, anything like that?
I have one. I actually really like the way that he has things set up, like how it's all kind of like messy and streaming across the floor and
Mm-hmm.
the lamps and whatever. I think everything looks pretty cool. I think you should kind of double down on that though. Like for example, there's books on the shelf, maybe have a couple on the floor, maybe just kind of
Mm-hmm.
have a few of them. Just maybe have that area just not look as neat because the rest of it isn't that neat. So I really like the way he streamed things about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like the idea. To add to that, I do like the idea of like putting books everywhere. It feels like maybe there could also be some books like or something else just like hanging out on these shelves. And then my thought was gonna be if you're gonna lay things down, make sure that they're not rotated in like it pretty much looks like these are more or less perfect 90-degree increments. Where like the sword is totally parallel, like this piggy bank is completely parallel, like these are pretty parallel. So I would go through and again just like rotate everything a little bit. Like rotate the sword, definitely rotate the ball so that if you have a texture that terminates in the top like this, it's not facing perfectly upwards because that barely ever happens. And then just go through and add a little bit more rotation, maybe like translate stuff around so it isn't quite as linear. But I do like everything is just kind of like on the floor. Also another thing I just noticed is it looks like maybe there could use some molding on the bottom of the floor. Yeah, like you can kind of see, like it doesn't quite feel like a natural termination of floor into hardwood, especially because like if you've ever looked at videos of how to install hardwood floors, they usually don't butt perfectly up to the wall. They'll be like a tiny little gap, and then the molding will sort of hide any imperfections there. But yeah. Any other thoughts, comments? I like for this one a lot how the there's like that light kind of reflecting across the floor. Like I think that's like a really interesting effect actually. For this one it feels maybe a little bit weird that so it feels a little weird that this whole area is like completely dark. Easiest fix for that honestly might just be turning on global illumination a little bit. That would probably fix a lot of that darkness with just like automatically calculating bounce light for you. It will bump your render times up, but kind of, I don't know. Half the time I turn on global illumination because I'm like, this is just going to make my stuff look way nicer and I don't need to like spend hours doing it. So might be worth considering or at least trying. If you don't like it, you can always turn it off. And then the other thing I actually noticed in this particular render, is there a hole for this door or is it just sort of sitting on the wall? There's a hole? All right. It feels like the door, is the door, it's not open, is it?
No, it's closed.
Okay. It feels like maybe this should be attached. Sorry, no, never mind, ignore me, my bad. I was looking at, from this particular angle, it kind of looks like that this is like the side of the door and it's shadowed, instead of that being molding. What? Yeah, no, my bad, okay, ignore me, that was dumb. And then the other thing that I was looking at from this angle, so this would be, like, because you have this light here shining across the floor, this would be a really great time to show in some, like, bump maps or roughness maps on the floor, because they would show up really, really nicely in this area, even if they're, like, subtle for the rest of it. And the fact that there correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like there's any bump maps or anything on this right now. All right. So I might go through and add some, at least between the floorboards. And that was like, you know, I would go through and do that. I think it would look nice. And again, just like watch the wood grain on the floors or the chair here. Mostly on the top, I think. It looks like that's kind of running in a strange direction, but I mean, I think overall, like compositionally and stuff, like these look pretty interesting. I think the daylight feels maybe a little bit too orange to me, but not in a way that I find super offensive. And I think you have enough difference between the day and the night lighting where it like doesn't super bother me personally. And I actually really like with the night lighting, I think you found a good balance of like very clearly showing the main light source, I guess, in the room, and having everything illuminated enough so you can see it, but it still does feel like a night scene, where nothing is like completely like crazy lost in shadow, but you still do have like a very clear light source for most of the scene. For the daylighting, I think I would take it not necessarily even more yellowy, like I think maybe just less saturated. So, and this is gonna look like probably nothing, but if you had this glorious plane with this sad little area light, fantastic. What? Oh, because I'm looking at the alpha. All right. 3, 7. All right, so if you had something like, we're using color temperature or just color? All right. So one thing you could do is use color temperature, but it looks like maybe your light was something sort of like this color, whereas like almost like an orange sherbet sort of color here. So you could either like shift this more towards yellow, but I think what I would actually recommend is just shifting it a little bit so that the color is a little bit desaturated. So even doing, and it looks completely different on my computer screen than it does on the projector, but even like just desaturating it ever so slightly, you still get that like warm color temperature in it, but it's not quite so overpoweringly orange, if that makes sense. And then again, you could, switch that to make it, more yellow toned if you wanted. But yeah, but I mean, I do think you have like nice use of color temperature. And then for the one, I think for this one, I do really like, we can see sort of like the window light coming in and like shining on the floor, and that's sort of bluey. Like that's weirdly satisfying to me. But yeah, cool. Any other questions or comments on that? Cool.
Actually, I have one more.
Yes.
It was about the
Oh.
lamp on the table. The other night one, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the way that the lamp casts light, especially on like the camera and stuff.
Yeah.
I think the way it's set up is pretty good.
Yeah. No, I agree. It was a super fun touch. I was a fan of this from pretty much when it was pitched. And it totally came out well. Yeah. Cool. Anything else? All right. With that, I think. Wait. All right. Do we go through everyone that submitted stuff? Looks like we have. All right. Did I miss anyone's stuff? All right. With that,